It was the dead of night and the city was shrouded in darkness, with only the street lamps providing any light. Emily was walking home from a friend's house when she received a phone call from her best friend, Madison. "Emily, are you up for a dare?" Madison asked, her voice full of excitement. Emily was a thrill seeker and was always up for a new challenge. "What kind of dare?" she asked. "I heard about this abandoned asylum in the forest, and I dare you to spend the night there," Madison said. Emily's heart raced with excitement. This was exactly the kind of thrill she was looking for. "I'll do it," she said without hesitation. The next day, Emily set out on her journey to the asylum. She was determined to prove her bravery and complete the dare. As she entered the forest, she couldn't help but feel intimidated by the eerie surroundings. The dense trees blocked out the sun, and the only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. Finally, she arrived at the entrance to the asylum. It was a large, imposing building with broken windows and rusted bars. The sign that once hung above the entrance was now missing, leaving only the faded outline. Emily hesitated for a moment, taking in the sight of the asylum. She knew that it had been shut down due to reports of inhumane experiments, but she didn't let that deter her. She was here to prove her bravery and complete the dare. So, she pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The interior of the asylum was just as creepy as the outside. Dust covered the floors and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. Strange noises echoed through the halls, making Emily's heart race with fear. Despite the fear that was starting to grip her, Emily pressed on, determined to complete the dare. Little did she know that the true terror was only just beginning. As Emily approached the entrance of the abandoned asylum, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The once grand and imposing building was now in shambles. The iron gates were rusted and creaked in the wind, and Emily couldn't help but think that she was making a mistake by entering this place. She took a deep breath and pushed aside her fears, determined to complete the dare. She stepped inside the entrance hall, her footsteps echoing in the empty and desolate space. The walls were peeling, and the floorboards creaked under her feet as she made her way deeper into the building. Suddenly, she heard a noise coming from down the hall. It was a soft, almost imperceptible sound, but it was enough to send shivers down her spine. Emily stopped in her tracks, her heart racing, thinking, was she really alone in this place? She cautiously advanced, her hand on the wall for support. The noise grew louder, a haunting whisper that seemed to be coming from all around her. Emily's fear was growing with each passing moment, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She reached the end of the hall, and the whispers stopped. The silence was even more unsettling, and Emily felt like she was being drawn into a trap. She hesitated for a moment, but the thrill seeker in her urged her forward. As she continued her journey, strange noises and movements hinted at the presence of the ghost, increasing her fear and tension. Emily had entered the asylum with confidence, but now she was starting to realize the danger she was in. The ghost was already making its presence known, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a matter of time before it revealed itself in full. Emily was feeling more and more trapped with every step she took. The sounds of her own footsteps echoed through the empty halls of the asylum, the only company she had. She wished she had never agreed to this dare. Suddenly, she heard a faint shuffling sound coming from one of the rooms. She cautiously approached the room and pushed the door open. As soon as she entered, she was met with the ghostly figure of a patient, standing in front of her with a vengeful glare in its eyes. Emily screamed, her voice echoing through the halls. She tried to run, but the ghost was too quick, blocking her path. It was then that she realized the true extent of the danger she was in. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. The ghost didn't respond. Instead, it simply floated closer to her, its eyes never leaving hers. Emily could feel its malevolent presence and the weight of its anger bearing down on her. She didn't know what this ghost wanted from her, but she knew that it wouldn't end well for her. "I'm sorry," Emily said, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know this place was haunted." The ghost still didn't respond. It was as if it couldn't hear her, or it simply didn't care. Emily's heart was racing as she tried to find a way out. But the asylum was now a maze, and she was lost. She couldn't find her way back to the entrance, and the ghost was getting closer and closer. She could feel its breath on her neck, the coldness of its presence making her shiver. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the ghost was gone. Emily was left alone in the empty room, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know how much time had passed, but she knew she needed to find a way out of the asylum before the ghost returned. And as she continued her search for an exit, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed, that she was being hunted. The haunting had begun, and Emily was the target. Emily had never felt so scared in her life. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and she could feel the sweat beating on her forehead. She had to find a way out, but every turn she took seemed to lead her deeper into its depths. The ghost was still stalking her, its vengeful presence following her every move. As she ran down a long, dark hallway, she came across a room filled with rusted medical equipment. The sight was enough to make her stomach turn, and she realized the extent of the horrors that had taken place within these walls. She turned a corner and found herself in a room with a single window. It was a small glimmer of hope in the otherwise hopeless situation. She sprinted towards it, but as she reached it, she realized it was covered with bars. She was trapped. Suddenly, she heard footsteps coming towards her. She turned around and saw the ghost, its glowing eyes fixed on her. She tried to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She was paralyzed with fear. The ghost inched closer and closer, its presence overpowering her. But then, she remembered why she was here. She was a thrill seeker, and she couldn't let this ghost defeat her. With a burst of courage, she dashed out of the room. Emily was running, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to find a way out of the asylum. But as she turned to the next corner, she came face to face with the ghost. It stood before her, its form a hazy outline of what it once was, its eyes burning with an unquenchable rage. This was the very thing she had come here to face, the thrill she sought. But now that it was here, staring her down, she realized the true cost of her actions. As she stood there, panting and afraid, the ghost began to speak. Its voice was a faint whisper, carried on the wind, but its words were filled with pain and anger. "You came here for thrills, for excitement," it said. "Do you understand the cost of your actions, the misery you have brought upon yourself?" Emily was ashamed. She had never considered the consequences of her actions, never thought about the danger she was putting herself in. And now she was facing the very thing she had sought, a monster that would stop at nothing to exact its revenge. "I didn't know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry." The ghost was relentless, though, its anger still burning bright. "You should have known," it said. "You should have understood the dangers of seeking thrills, of facing the unknown. And now, you must pay the price." Emily was trembling, her thoughts racing. What could she do? How could she escape this place? And then, she remembered something she had learned in her adventures. She closed her eyes and focused, calling upon all her strength and courage. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer afraid. "I will pay the price," she said, her voice steady. "But I will not go down without a fight. I will face you, and I will survive." The ghost was taken aback, its anger faltering for a moment. And in that moment, Emily made her move. She ran past the ghost, her eyes fixed on the exit, determined to escape this place and never look back. As she ran, she could feel the ghost's presence behind her, could feel its anger and its wrath. But she refused to look back, refused to let fear control her. She was determined to survive, to make it out of the asylum alive. The sounds of footsteps echoed through the hallways of the abandoned asylum as Emily raced down the corridor, her heart pounding in her chest. The ghost's presence was palpable, its vengeful energy chasing her at every turn. Her thoughts were muddled with fear, and all she could focus on was finding a way out. As she turned a corner, she saw a glimmer of light in the distance, and her heart leapt with hope. She picked up her pace, her breathing heavy as she approached the exit. She was so close, she could taste freedom. But as she reached for the door handle, she felt a cold grip wrap around her wrist. She spun around to face the ghost, its ghastly figure towering over her. Its presence was intense, its anger palpable. It was clear that it would not let her leave the asylum alive. She took a deep breath and mustered all the courage she had. She looked into the ghost's eyes and spoke with a steady voice. "I understand your pain, but I cannot right the wrongs of the past." The ghost's grip on her wrist slackened, and Emily took the opportunity to break free. She ran out the door and into the open air, her heart pounding with relief. She had faced her fears and found a way out. The thrill-seeking part of her was gone, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the consequences of her actions. As she walked away from the asylum, Emily couldn't help but reflect on the experiences she had there. The dangers of seeking thrill and excitement were all too real, and she realized that sometimes the consequences of our actions can be much more frightening than anything we could imagine. She looked back at the asylum, its ominous presence still looming, and took one last deep breath before walking away, leaving the past behind.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to stay tuned for more true stories.